In this video, I'm sharing my February TBR. Welcome back to Candlewick Library. I'm Cheryl. I have a very ambitious pile of books for February. First, I'm really hoping to do the Once Upon a Faebruary readathon that Tay at Tales and Treats with Tay is doing for the whole month of February. The co-hosts are Celestria, Cat Stories, Christia Cole, Paperbacks and Ponytails, and the Writing Songbird 5108. It is centered around fairy tales and fairy tale retellings. They've picked 12 prompts, and then they have a system where if you read one prompt, you are pixie status. If you do 7 or more, you're princess status. And if you do 12, you're fairy godmother status. And they've also said that if you want to read books that aren't fairy tale retellings, to consider yourself to have done this readathon, you have to read at least one retelling. I really like fairy tale retellings, and so I really wanted to try to get as many of these as I could. Some of them are going to be rereads, and I will share that as I go along. The first prompt is Rose Red, so the book should have red on the cover. For this, I'm going to reread Book of 1,000 Days by Shannon Hale. You can see the red on the cover. Shannon Hale used to be one of my favorite authors. I do not read her anymore. Her books have taken a turn in content that I don't like, but Book of 1,000 Days was one of my 2 favorite books by her. And so I want to reread it and see if I still like it. This book is a retelling of the Brothers Grimm story of Maid Maleen. When Lady Saren refuses to get married, she and her maid are sent to live in this tower for 7 years. The next prompt is Fairy Godmother, and it is a gender-swapped retelling. The only one I could even think of is Son of the Deep by K.B. Hoyle, and I have read this already a few years ago, but it is on my youngest daughter's reading list this year. Right now, she is reading a book that I pre-read for her last summer, and I thought it was great, but she's finding it extremely violent. And to me, it's not that violent at all, but she is very sensitive to blood and anything else. And so I thought maybe I should reread this one and make sure that this one is not going to have any content that she's going to have a hard time with. It's a retelling of The Little Mermaid, but the boy is the mermaid. The next prompt is Merry Men, and it is supposed to have a male main character. For this one, I am not doing a retelling or fairy tale. I am going to be reading The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. This is in a continuation of my read of all of the Sherlock Holmes stories, and I really wanted to get to this one in February, so I'm going to count it. The next prompt is Evil Stepmother, a Notorious Villain, and I found this book Fairest by Marissa Meyer in a little free library a few months ago. A couple years ago, I read through the Cinder or Lunar Chronicles, I think they're called. Yeah, the Lunar Chronicles. And I really enjoyed them, but I had not read this yet, and I wasn't sure. I've seen mixed reviews on it. Since I got it for free, then I decided to give it a chance. I can't remember if Queen Lavanna, who this book is centered on, if she was a retelling of the Evil Queen or not. I can't remember. So I'm just going to assume, since all the other books were fairy tale retellings, that this is as well. The next prompt is Pixie Dust, a Magical Creature, and I thought, what better to read for Pixie Dust than a book with Tinkerbell in it? So I'm going to be reading Becoming Hook. This is by Mary Meckham. This is a book that I actually heard about from Tay, and I also thought that would be appropriate since she's the one doing the readathon. It sounds really good. It's a retelling of the Peter Pan story with Peter Pan as the villain and Hook as the hero. If you've seen the show Once Upon a Time, you know that that's how it is in that show as well, and I love Captain Hook in that show, and so I have a feeling I'll enjoy this one. The next prompt is Midnight, a hyped book or a book that you feel like you're the last to read. So for that, I'm choosing Fox by Nadine Brandeis, and this is a story of Guy Fawkes, and obviously it's going to be a retelling since it's historical fiction, and I'm assuming it's going to be kind of like her book about the Romanovs, where there's some truth and then some made up. I don't know. I'll find out, I guess. And I feel like a lot of people have talked about this book, and I've been really wanting to read it for a while. The next prompt is Bluebeard, a lesser-known retelling, and so I chose Strands of Bronze and Gold by Jane Nickerson. I have never heard anyone talk about Jane Nickerson or any of her books on YouTube, and so I feel like it is a lesser known retelling, but also it is a retelling of Bluebeard, so I felt like this was the perfect one for this prompt. I have read this before, but it has been probably 8 or 9 years, and so I really want to read it again to see if I still like it. I remember that it was pretty violent, as you would expect Bluebeard to be, and so I'm not sure if it's still in my taste or not. Jane's daughter was one of my best friends when we lived in Wisconsin. And so I've met Jane a few times. She's very nice. And I remember it being very well written. I just need to see if I still like the content or not. The next prompt is Wolf, an animal that is integral to the plot. For this, I'm choosing my other favorite book by Shannon Hale, and I've considered this one of my favorite books for many, many years. It's The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale. This is obviously a retelling of The Goose Girl, and I know that there are a few animals in here. She's pretending to be the goose girl taking care of geese, so there's animals. Yeah, I just want to see if I still love this book or not. The next prompt is Musical Voice, a book that incorporates music or singing. Recently in a video, I talked about Roseblood by A.G. Howard and had said that I really loved this retelling of The Phantom of the Opera, but that I remembered a couple of things in it that I wasn't sure I would still like, and I wanted to reread it to see if I still wanted to have this on my shelf, so I figured this is the perfect time to reread this. The next prompt is Long Locks, a Girl with Long Hair, and I chose Ring of Secrets by Rosanna M. White. This is a historical fiction about the Culper spy ring, which is something I find really interesting and I like reading about. And so I'm very excited to read this book. I wanted to read it in February, and so I thought, how can I fit this into this readathon? It does look like she has long hair, and since it's about something that happened, but changing the story to make it fictional, I decided this would count as well. The next prompt is Snow Queen, a character that is on a quest, Kingdom's Dawn. This is by Chuck Black. We saw him at the homeschool convention we went to last summer, and I bought this whole series. It's pretty short. And if I'm remembering correctly, he said that they're kind of a retelling of, they're like a biblical retelling. I'm going to assume that the boy in this is on a quest. It looks like it. So I probably will read this one for that prompt. The last prompt is Thumbelina, the shortest book on your TBR, or a short book that's under 250 pages. So for this, I chose this Ponies for a King. And this one is very short. It's under 100 pages, and it's not necessarily a fairy tale or a retelling, but it does have kind of a medieval look to it, so I'm going to use that. And since it is such a short book, I think it's perfect for a readathon when I have a ridiculous amount of books to try to read. So obviously that is a lot of books, and most of them are not very small. So I do not know if I'll for sure get through all of those in February, but I'm hoping I can. If I can't, at least they've set it up where you can reach different levels based on how many books you read. I really wanted to do Feb Regency as well, but I wasn't really sure how many of those I could fit in during February with how many I wanted to read for this readathon. So I'll see if anything that I read fits into that category or can fit into that category, or if I somehow get through all of these and have time, then I might add one of those onto my list. The other thing happening in February is Tiffany at Beautiful Minutia and Christy at Christy Lewis Dostoevsky in Space are doing a month-long tribute to Jennifer Brooks, who recently passed away. I did feel like I wanted to read at least one book. So I'm not going to be participating in their whole readathon and reading multiple ones or their group read, but I wanted to read at least one book that was an inspired purchase from her. The first time I was introduced to her was when she was doing a live show or a live sprinting or something with Christy Lewis. And she was talking a lot about Napoleon, and she made me so intrigued with Napoleon in a way I never have been before. I've always just been like, okay, I know who Napoleon is. I know his basic story. Don't care too much. She made him sound so interesting, and I really wanted to read something about him. And so then she made a video a while back of different Napoleon books. And one of the books that she talked about was one called Napoleon's Plunder. And in that, it talks about art and different things that he stole. It just sounded really fascinating. And some of the artwork I've seen in the Louvre, and she said that it would be a really good book for learning a little bit more about Napoleon, but also if you love art. And so I thought that would be perfect. I probably will not read the whole thing in February, planning on it being something I just start in February and continue for a few months. I would love to hear if you're taking part in the Once Upon a February readathon, or if you're doing Feb Regency, or if you're doing the readathon in honor of Jennifer Brooks, or if you're doing any other readathons in February. And let me know if you've read any of these books and if you think any of them should be my priority at the beginning of the month.